This is an MJA Inc. Investigations warning. This MJA podcast is rated E for explicit. Some details of a case and language used on this podcast might be upsetting to some of our listeners. Listeners' discretion is advised. And for those who are still with us, kick back and enjoy the show. Welcome to our MJ podcast. This series, Cases from the Deep Freezer, Episode 8, Part 9, 12 Unsolved Cold Cases. Case Update. On Episode 11, Part 4, Profiling 12 Unsolved Homicide Cases in California, we profiled a case where we missed the update on the case. On December 11, 1974, 31-year-old Patricia Ann Ross was overdue for a dinner engagement. A friend went to Ross's apartment to check on her and discovered 31-year-old Patricia Ann Ross dead in her bedroom. The 31-year-old Ross was found naked in her bed, laying face down. Ross had been strangled to death and sexually assaulted. It was reported that Ross was violently sodomized. Apart from some blood at the scene that was believed to have come from the killer, there was not a lot of evidence. The case went cold. In 1996, law enforcement took another look at the case. This time the blood found at the crime scene was sent in for DNA testing. The results confirmed an unknown male DNA profile. It was run through CODIS, but the database returned no matches. In 2007, law enforcement took another look at the case, and by doing this, they zeroed in on Larry Stevens, who was in the case file as being questioned. In March 2015, Larry Stevens had been arrested for a domestic violence incident, which required him to provide a DNA sample to the authorities. Then in May 2015, the DNA profile from the Ross crime scene returned a match in CODIS. It was a match to Larry Stevens' DNA profile. Larry Stevens was 65 years old, was arrested for first-degree murder. Larry Stevens' murder trial took place in early 2018, and a jury of his peer convicted Stevens of first-degree murder. In May 2018, Larry Stevens, who was 68 years old, was sentenced to life behind bars. Prison records state that Larry Stevens is still alive and he remains incarcerated at San Quentin State Prison in California. Now back to tonight's episode. On this episode, we will profile 12 unsolved cold cases from 6 states across the nation. There will be a male case profiled and a female case profiled from each 6 states. My name is Mark, and I will be your host for tonight's show. Joining me later will be our co-host, Olivia. We are coming to you from Winter Paradise, located in Hudson, Florida. So, let's get started. Welcome to Vermont. Case 1. Unsolved homicide. An unidentified white female with estimated age of 35 to 45 years old was labeled as a Jane Doe was discovered on May 15, 1935 in the Middlebury located in Addison County, Vermont. Cause of death, homicide by gunshot wound to the head. Case 2. Missing. Wilford King III, a 37-year-old white male, went missing on October 24, 1980 from Essex, Vermont. Welcome to Rhode Island. Case 3. Missing. Doreen Ann Marfo, a 34-year-old white female, vanished without a trace on March 29, 1990 from Johnston, Rhode Island. Case 4. Missing. Francisco Pimentel, a 18-year-old white male, went missing on August 8, 1976 from Providence, Rhode Island. Welcome to Maryland. Case 5. Missing. Nancy Marlene Snow, a 44-year-old white female, vanished without a trace on November 6, 1980 from Annapolis, Maryland. Case 6. Missing. Oliver Wendell Munson, a 39-year-old black male, went missing on February 13, 1984 from Cantonsville, Maryland. Welcome to Massachusetts. Case 7. Missing. Lynn Burdick, a 18-year-old white female, vanished without a trace on April 17, 1982 from Florida, Massachusetts. Case 8. Missing. Charles Hector MacArthur, a 39-year-old white male, went missing on September 14, 1982 from Worcester, Massachusetts. Welcome to Ohio. Case 9. Missing. Ruth Elizabeth Baumgardner, a 22-year-old white female, vanished without a trace on May 4th, 1937 from Delaware, Ohio. Case 10. Missing. Johnny J. Markley, a 37 to 38-year-old white male, went missing on December 15, 1995 from Farmington Township, Ohio. Welcome to Michigan. Case 11. Missing. Ida Dean Anderson, a 21-year-old white female, vanished without a trace on September 18, 1958, from Ann Arbor, Michigan. Case 12. Missing. Gordon Thomas Page Jr., a 28-year-old white male, went missing on May 27, 1991, from Grand Rapids, Michigan. Let's take a pause for the cause, and when we return, Olivia will be on the line. Be back in a moment. Welcome to our MJ podcast, this series, Cases from the Deep Freezer. This is episode 8, part 9, 12 Unsolved Cold Cases. We have Olivia on the line. How are you doing tonight?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm just peachy. Okay, let's dig into these unsolved mysteries. Welcome to Vermont. Case 1. The Doe Network has 3 Jane Does and 4 John Does listed as being located in the state of Vermont. Welcome to Addison County, Vermont. Unsolved homicide. Jane Doe is a white female with the age of 35 to 45 years old who was discovered on May 15, 1935, with 2 other sets of remains that are males, John Does. Estimated date of death was 1932 to 1934. Cause of death was homicide by gunshot wound to the head. The state of Jane Doe's remains was not recognizable, near complete, or complete skeleton. On May 15, 1935, the skeleton remains of 3 persons were found off the remote old logging road leading to Brookins and Blackmere hunting camp in East Middlebury, Vermont. A woman named Grace DeGue and her daughter Inez Perry Masterson was looking for flowers in the forest when they stumbled upon the skeletal remains of 3 murder victims. The victims had been there for some time, for a small tree root about 1/2 inch to 3/4 inches thick had grown over the leg of one of the victims. Each victim had been killed with a gunshot wound to the head. It is suspected that they were dumped in that location as far back as November 1932. This is based on the testimony of a hunter who was hunting in the area and missed his deer because just then he detected a terrible odor but didn't investigate further. The location recently has been identified as off of Burnham Drive, a road that did not exist at the time. There's 3 skeletons found together were a female aged 35 to 45, a juvenile teen ages 13 to 15, and a child ranging 9 to 11 years old. The DNA of the middle child and the adult female suggested a parent-to-child relationship, whereas the victim's DNA could not be analyzed. However, they are believed to be related to one another. Harvard anthropologists George Woodbury and Ernest A. Houghton suspected at the time that the victims were of Armenian descent with skillful and costly dental work. The anthropologists also wrongly thought that this was the remains of Mrs. Cora Golden and her 2 children who were missing from Milton, Vermont in 1923. Instead, Mrs. Golden and her son had run off with the local farmhand, Joseph Carter, and started a new life. Cora Golden's daughter had been discovered with an adoptive family in Hartford, Connecticut. If you have any info concerning this case, please contact the Vermont State Medical Examiner's Office, Steve Shapiro at 802-863-7320.
Case 2. Welcome to Essex, Vermont. Missing person. The Doe Network has 24 males listed as being missing from the state of Vermont. On October 24th, 1980, 37-year-old Wilfred King III went missing from Essex, Vermont. King was last seen by his father leaving his residence on Jericho Road in Essex, Vermont at 7 p.m. on October 24th, 1980. The 37-year-old King left driving his blue and white four-wheel drive 1979 Chevrolet Blazer pickup truck. The pickup truck had a plow frame with a yellow plow on the front. The truck had a yellow light on the roof with a trailer hitch in the back and with the Vermont license plate number E3050. That day, 37-year-old Wilfred King III was expecting an appointment call and wanted to stay home until he received it. King did receive the call, and afterwards King went hunting behind the house, then went home and cleaned up, and then left again. Wilfred King III has never been heard from again. A few days later, on the same day, the 37-year-old King was reported missing. Hunters found King's blood-stained crutches in the woods off Middle Road in Colchester, Vermont. An article of clothing thought to be King's was also located. A few weeks after that, King's truck was found abandoned and burned at the Oak Hill gravel pit in Williston, Vermont. Investigators believe 37-year-old Wilfred King III was the victim of a homicide. King was in the process of a divorce at the time of his disappearance, and his relationship with Diane Irish King, his estranged wife of 14 years, was very difficult. Wilfred King's parents feared for his safety and tried to make sure he never went out alone. They tried to take his oldest son with him when he left on the day of his disappearance, but King refused. Wilfred King and his oldest son, Joey, who was 13 years old, were allowed to live in the family home on Jericho Road and keep most of the family's property, pending the outcome of the divorce. Diane King had moved out of the house with the couple's two younger children, but shortly after her husband's disappearance, Diane King moved back into the home. Diane King invited two men to stay as roommates. Her son Joey moved in with his grandparents. Diane initially agreed to take a polygraph about Wilfred King's disappearance, but then changed her mind and refused to cooperate with the investigation. Diane King instructed her two younger children not to talk to the police. Diane immediately started selling equipment Wilfred King owned for his paving business, receiving $11,000. Diane King also let her friends borrow her husband's snowmobile. According to Diane, the two roommates who stayed with her at Wilfred's house in the aftermath of his disappearance had damaged several things Wilfred King owned, including paving equipment, a boat, and two motorcycles. Joey moved some of his father's things to his grandparents' house to keep them from being destroyed by his mom's roommates. Diane claimed she was afraid of both men and that one of them frequently carried a gun and the other slept with a gun under his mattress. One of the roommates went to her workplace and smashed in her car windows and was jailed for several months as a result. Both men eventually moved out of the King residence. Diane King filed for sole ownership of the couple's home. Wilfred King's parents had given him the land, which was next door to their own home, when he was 19 years old, and King had built the house there prior to his marriage. King had dropped out of high school and worked in the family paving business. In the ensuing court battle over Wilfred King's possessions, his father was eventually awarded his house and belongings. Diane King was forced to leave the residence. In 1988, Diane filed to have Wilfred King declared legally dead. In response, the son Joey, who was by then 20, filed a civil suit against his mother. Joey claimed that his mother Diane had helped murder his father, Wilfred King, in 1980 and therefore should not benefit financially from his death. Instead, Joey asked the court to use family's property to set up a trust fund for himself and his two younger siblings. Joey ultimately moved into his father's home and raised his family there. Joey has reconciled with his mother, who has remarried. Wilfred King's parents believe Diane hired somebody to kill their son so she could obtain his estate. Wilfred's father died in 2006, but his mother is still alive. Diane has a minor criminal record for retail theft and driving under the influence, but no violent crimes. No one has been criminally charged in Wilfred King's case, but he is presumed to have been the victim of a homicide. King's parents had a monument placed for him in the cemetery in the late 1980s with 2 squirrels on it since King enjoyed squirrel hunting. If you have any info concerning this case, please call the Essex Police Department, Detective Rick Gary at 802-878-8331.
Welcome to Rhode Island. Case 3. The Doe Network has 3 females listed as missing from the state of Rhode Island. Welcome to Johnston, Rhode Island. Missing person. On March 29, 1990, 34-year-old Doreen Ann Marfo vanished without a trace from Johnston, Rhode Island. On March 29, 1990, Doreen was last seen in her home on Hartford Avenue in Johnston, Rhode Island. Doreen Ann Marfo disappeared from there and has never been heard from again. The 34-year-old Doreen had a poor relationship with her husband of 7 years, Stefan Marfo. Doreen had quit her purchasing director job at the Rhode Island School of Design to work on their marriage. On the day of Doreen's disappearance, her husband, Stefan, took a 75-minute lunch break from work. His lunch breaks were usually only 20 to 30 minutes. Stefan Marfo claims he went home to eat lunch with Doreen and went back to work. Stefan went on to claim when he returned home at 4 p.m. that day, Doreen was gone. Doreen was supposed to call her mother on the day of her disappearance, but that call never happened. Stefan said Doreen packed a suitcase with a week's worth of clothes and took $600 from the safe when she left her home. The 34-year-old Doreen did not take her 1984 Ford Tempo. Doreen left behind her toothbrush, her hair curlers, and her 2 pet cats. Doreen didn't take any of the $50,000 in her and Stefan's joint bank accounts. There was no sign of a struggle at the residence. Stefan did not report Doreen missing for 2 days. At the time of her disappearance, Stefan suspected Doreen was having an affair, and he hired a private detective to follow her. There is no evidence that Doreen was actually being unfaithful. Investigators do not believe Doreen left on her own accord, and they think Stefan murdered her. Doreen's family said she was close to them and would never have left without contacting them. In June 1990, police received 2 typewritten letters. The first one stated that Stefan had strangled Doreen on the day of her disappearance and dumped her body in a pond in Providence, Rhode Island. The second letter accused Doreen of having affairs with some of her co-workers, which the letter identified them by name. Both letters were typed on a typewriter from Stefan's mother's house. Law enforcement believes Stefan wrote them, although the letters referred to him in the third person. When the police confronted Stefan about the letters, he hired an attorney and stopped cooperating with the investigation. In 1999, 9 years after Doreen's disappearance, Stefan told his family members he was going on vacation to straighten out his life. Shortly after he returned, Stefan shot his estranged girlfriend to death and seriously wounded her new boyfriend. Stefan then drove to a secluded reservoir in Connecticut and shot himself in the head. He left a suicide note for his mother, which referred to his feelings of guilt about Doreen's disappearance, but Stefan did not say what had happened to her. Stefan was never charged in connection with his wife's disappearance, but investigators believe he is responsible. However, Doreen's mother describes Stefan as a kind and supportive man. Doreen's mother does not believe Stefan was involved in her daughter's disappearance. If you have any info concerning this case, please contact the Johnston Police Department Detective Stephen Lopez at 401-231-4210.
Case 4. The Doe Network has 18 males listed as missing from the state of Rhode Island. Welcome to Providence, Rhode Island. Missing person. On August 8, 1976, 18-year-old Francisco Pimentel went missing from Providence, Rhode Island. The 18-year-old Francisco enlisted in the Massachusetts Army National Guard. His orders directed him to travel to Fort Dix, New Jersey on August 8, 1976. The 18-year-old Francisco went to the Amtrak train station in Providence, Rhode Island, accompanied by friends and families. Francisco boarded the train with other recruits and his recruiter. However, the 18-year-old Francisco never arrived in Fort Dix, New Jersey. He has not been seen or heard from since. Law enforcement and Army CID finds the case very highly suspicious, with all said witnesses around the missing 18-year-old Francisco Pimentel. If you have any info concerning this case, please contact the Fall River Police Department at 508-676-8511.
Case 5. Welcome to Maryland. The Doe Network has 62 females listed as missing from the state of Maryland. Welcome to Annapolis, Maryland. Missing person. On November 6, 1980, 44-year-old Nancy Marlene Snow vanished without a trace from her Annapolis, Maryland home. Nancy Snow disappeared after allegedly returning to Annapolis, Maryland on or about November 6, 1980. The 44-year-old Snow had flown from St. Louis, Missouri, where she had been temporarily sent by her employers at the Republican National Committee during the Reagan and Bush campaign. Nancy Snow was a fundraiser for the campaign to elect McNary for senator. The evening of November 5, 1980, the 44-year-old Snow flew to Baltimore, Maryland to attend a private party. Nancy Snow allegedly spent the night there in a motel after the party and had breakfast with the man whose party she had attended. The man had dated Snow during the campaign. After breakfast, the 44-year-old Snow waited with the man in his car until her temporary house sitter picked her up. Paul T. Collins III, the house sitter, arrived driving a car. One witness remembers it wasn't Snow's turquoise VW convertible. The party male host claimed that Nancy got out of his car and they said goodbye, and Nancy Snow got into the car driven by Paul T. Collins. In a letter to Nancy's daughter, the male party host claimed that Nancy told him that she and Collins were to drive to Connecticut the next day. The family could not make no sense of the Connecticut detour. The family had been told by Nancy on the phone that night before, by letters and by postcards, that she was exhausted after being on the campaign trail for 2 months, that Nancy could not wait to get back to her Annapolis apartment and relax and catch up. That was the last time that the 44-year-old Nancy Snow was ever seen alive. Snow was never seen or heard from again by her family. The male house sitter, Paul T. Collins, claims he drove Snow home after in Annapolis from the Baltimore hotel. On that evening, Snow went out to a local Irish bar called McGarvey's for a drink. Collins claims that Nancy came home and said she met a captain named Captain J or Captain J. The so-called Captain J told Snow he was driving to Fort Lauderdale, Florida that night to pick up a yacht. Then Captain J was to deliver it to either the Bahamas or the U.S. Virgin Islands. Collins, the house sitter, claims that the 44-year-old Snow was going to go with Captain J and crew the boat. Collins went on to claim that Snow would be back by Christmas. The male house sitter, Collins, claims that 44-year-old Snow packed a few things and allegedly told him to use her checkbook to pay the bills while she was gone. The house sitter Collins claims he walked Snow to a certain street where Captain J was to pick her up. However, the house sitter, Paul T. Collins, got no contact information from the captain. Collins did not inquire after the name of the boat. Paul T. Collins does not remember the car Captain J was driving or the license plates number. Collins couldn't even tell law enforcement what Captain J even looked like. The house sitter Collins further claims Nancy left no note or letter for her daughters to tell them where she was going and with whom, or the name of the boat, or when she returned, and no contact information. Snow's family finds this unlikely as Nancy Snow was a devoted mother to her three young daughters and would never have left town in such a haste with a stranger. Snow's family believes she would not have left her belongings and checkbook in the hands of a stranger. The 44-year-old Snow called her daughters every day before her disappearance and would never have left town without calling her family to inform them of such a huge decision. Snow had asked all her daughters days before her disappearance to send her letters so she could read them when she arrived in Annapolis in a few days. In the 6 months after Snow's disappearance, the house sitter, Paul T. Collins, wrote checks to himself for bills on Snow's checkbook, forging her signature totaling around $10,000. Collins also continued to drive Snow's VW, even though Collins told the family that the VW was in storage. Paul T. Collins sold and gave away Snow's belongings, and all of her files and papers disappeared. After the house sitter, Paul T. Collins, was questioned by the Annapolis police in October 1981, Collins left the country for the Bahamas in December 1981. This was before Paul T. Collins could be questioned by a grand jury. The 44-year-old Nancy Snow's disappearance remains unsolved. There has been no Social Security activity on Snow's name since her disappearance. Nancy Snow has never used her credit cards or attempted to withdraw money from her bank account after her disappearance, even though that the 44-year-old Snow just inherited a sum of money a few months before her disappearance. Nancy Snow formerly worked as a talk show host in California. Snow speaks 7 languages, who formerly lived in Brazil and West Germany and has traveled extensively all over the world. Nancy Marlene Snow was declared legally dead in 1985. Foul play is suspected in her disappearance of the 44-year-old Nancy Snow. If you have any info concerning this case, please contact the Annapolis Police Department Cold Case Investigator Stanley Branford at 410-268-4141.
Case 6. The Doe Network has 63 males listed as missing from the state of Maryland. Welcome to Cantonsville, Maryland. Missing person. February 13th, 1984. 39-year-old Oliver Wendell Munson went missing from Cantonsville, Maryland. Oliver Wendell Munson, a bachelor, was last seen in the 600 block of Orpington Road in Cantonsville, Maryland. At 7:50 a.m., neighbors saw Munson leaving his home alone, apparently heading to work. The 39-year-old Munson never arrived at his job, where he was an industrial arts middle school teacher in Howard County, located in Maryland. Oliver Wendell Munson had an occasional girlfriend, but on weekends, 39-year-old Munson often left town to visit his mother and 2 brothers on the Eastern Shore. Munson's family reported him missing the next day on February 14, 1984, after checking his home. On February 16, 1984, the 1980 Ford Pinto belonging to Munson was found parked on Braeside Road in Cantonsville, Maryland, about 2 blocks from his home. The car was parked in the opposite direction than what Munson had taken to work, and the right front tire was flat. Police checked the tire and determined it did not have a leak. In Munson's car was the touring cap he usually wore, his lunch bag, and a school notebook on the front seat. 39-year-old Munson's hobby was working on old cars. Investigators believe that Munson may have been murdered in retaliation for testifying against an auto theft ring. Munson had unknowingly bought a blue 1973 Datsun 240Z from a ring member the year before he disappeared. The car had been stolen on the morning of Munson's disappearance. On February 27, 1984, another vehicle that had been stolen was recovered at the edge of Leakin Park in West Baltimore, Maryland. Owner of the vehicle contacted police after it was returned when he found 2 business receipts with Munson's name on them. Also found in the vehicle were traces of unidentified blood and a small caliber shell casing. 39-year-old Wendell Munson's body has never been found. Munson may have been dumped or buried somewhere, perhaps in Leakin Park, where the stolen car was later found. On February 28, 1984, police searched Leakin Park without success. On May 28, 1985, 39-year-old Oliver Wendell Munson was legally declared dead. It is highly likely that Munson was the victim of a homicide. If you have any info concerning this case, please contact the Baltimore County Police Department Detective Carol Bollinger at 410-887-3943 or 410-887-2133 or 410-887-2544.
Let's take a pause for the cause, and when we return, we will profile 6 more cold cases from the deep freezer. Be back in a moment. Welcome back to our MJA podcast, this series, Cases from the Deep Freezer. This is episode 8, part 9, 12 Unsolved Cold Cases. Case 7. Welcome to Massachusetts. The Doe Network has 33 females listed as missing from the state of Massachusetts. Welcome to Florida, Massachusetts. Missing person. On April 17, 1982, 18-year-old Lynn Burdick vanished without a trace from Florida, Massachusetts. Burdick disappeared from a roadside convenience store, the Barefoot Peddler, where she worked as a clerk. The store was only a few minutes' walk from Burdick's home. The 18-year-old Burdick would normally be in the company of a friend or her cousin who owned the store with her husband. But due to unforeseen circumstances, Burdick was left to mind the store alone that night. Burdick's last contact was with her cousin Suzanne, who was a co-owner of the store. Suzanne normally phoned the store every hour to make sure things were running smoothly. Suzanne's last contact with 18-year-old Burdick was at 8:20 p.m., which was 1 hour before closing time. In the background, Suzanne heard the bell trip by the front door, which alerts the clerk that someone has entered the store. Can't talk, Burdick told her. Got a customer. Another customer walked in 40 minutes later to find the store empty. When police arrived at the store, they found no sign of a struggle. A book that Burdick had been reading and a soda she had been drinking were undisturbed on the counter. Burdick's McCann Vocational Technical High School jacket and her purse were gone. Also missing was $187 from the cash register. Working with the physical evidence and no witnesses, law enforcement concluded that the 18-year-old Lynn Burdick was abducted. Law enforcement searched for Lynn Burdick for months with volunteers, state police, planes, and helicopters. One theory was the possibility of a serial killer could be responsible for Burdick's disappearance. This was because of previous attacks on young girls in the area. If you have any info concerning this case, please contact the Massachusetts State Police Detective Station, B4, Cheshire, Barracks, Sergeant David L. Buell, Jr. at 413-499-1112, extension 306.
Case 8. Doe Network has 21 males listed as missing from the state of Massachusetts. Welcome to Worcester, Massachusetts. Missing person. On September 14, 1982, 39-year-old Charles Hector MacArthur went missing from Worcester, Massachusetts. In the month before his disappearance, MacArthur had seemed troubled. At the time, the 39-year-old MacArthur was married and had 2 children. Charles Hector MacArthur worked as a supervisor at the Harrington and Richardson Firearms Company in Gardner, Massachusetts. Years of investigation has revealed that the 39-year-old MacArthur was holding some drugs for someone which he gave to a friend who never gave them back. As the person wanted those drugs, MacArthur was nervous because he didn't have them. The day of his disappearance, MacArthur's daughter answered a phone call from someone whose name she has since forgotten. The daughter took a message. When her father, MacArthur, got home, she told him the caller said to go to the Italian kitchen on Shrewsbury Street. The 39-year-old MacArthur went as directed and never came back. Police learned that 3 men had escorted MacArthur out of the restaurant. 2 weeks later, his Thunderbird was found on the outskirts of Boston's combat zone with 2 weeks' worth of parking tickets on the windshield. MacArthur's leather jacket and cigarettes were inside his vehicle. Prime suspect in the disappearance is still alive, but others who were likely involved have died. Evidence indicated that MacArthur was shot and his body was most likely dumped in water. Police searched lakes and ponds in the area after MacArthur's disappearance. MacArthur has been declared legally dead. If you have any info concerning this case, please contact the Worcester Police Detective Daniel Sullivan at 508-799-8651.
Case 9. Welcome to Ohio. The Doe Network has 57 females listed as missing from the state of Ohio. Welcome to Delaware, Ohio. Missing person. On May 4th, 1937, 22-year-old Ruth Elizabeth Baumgartner vanished without a trace from Delaware, Ohio. Ruth Baumgartner was a senior at the Ohio Wesleyan University, where she majored in art. The 22-year-old Baumgartner belonged to the Delta Delta Delta, or the Tri Delta sorority, and lived in Austin Hall on the campus. Baumgartner resided with her parents in the 2000 block of Arthur Avenue in Lakewood, Ohio, when she was not at college. The 22-year-old Baumgartner was last seen by her sorority sisters shortly after 11 p.m. on May 4, 1937. Baumgartner had her hair up in curlers and pins, and from all accounts, she was behaving normally at the time. Sometime before midnight, the 22-year-old Baumgartner said goodbye to her friends, and she has never been seen or heard from again. The Tri-Delts alerted campus authorities at 10:30 p.m. the following day when they realized that Baumgartner had not attended any of her classes. An investigation revealed that someone, probably Baumgartner herself, had left her dormitory room key on the back corner of the Austin Hall staircase between the second and third floors. The 22-year-old Baumgartner's new red Dodge was found parked undisturbed in its regular garage with the key still in the ignition. Ruth Baumgartner's room was in perfect order, which was uncharacteristic of her. The alarm clock had been set for 6 a.m. and had run down, indicating that she got up at that time on May 5, 1937, and left Austin Hall without being seen. The day that the 22-year-old Baumgartner had disappeared, she received 3 calls from an unidentified male.
The identity of the male caller remains unknown. At first it was believed that Baumgartner had suffered an asthmatic episode and wandered away from campus. The theory was bolstered by several reported sightings of the 22-year-old Baumgartner in the Delaware area in the days following her disappearance. None of the sightings were ever confirmed. At the time of Baumgartner went missing, she was worried about whether she would get enough credit hours to graduate in time. In the last letter the 22-year-old Baumgartner wrote to her parents, she stated that she had many things to do. Baumgartner did not know how she was going to do them all, and she was very, very tired. Law enforcement's investigation investigated the possibility that the 22-year-old Baumgartner left on her own accord, maybe with a boyfriend, since several of the reported sightings placed Baumgartner with a young man. However, Ruth Baumgartner was happily engaged to her boyfriend in Lakewood, and her friends did not believe she was seeing anyone else. There is also no evidence of foul play involved in Baumgartner's disappearance, although a local resident living near the campus reported hearing screams between 2 and 3 a.m. on May 5, 1937. The case was closed in 1939 at the request of Baumgartner's parents. If you have any info concerning this case, please contact the Ohio State Police.
Case 10. The Doe Network has 33 males listed as missing from the state of Ohio. Welcome to Farmington Township, Ohio, missing person. On December 15, 1995, 37 to 38-year-old Johnny J. Markley went missing from Farmington Township, Ohio. Johnny Markley was last seen with his wife Shelley Markley at their home in Farmington Township, Ohio on December 12, 1995. The couple's children went to school that morning. When they returned home that afternoon, the house was unlocked, but the parents weren't there. There was no note explaining the Markleys' absence. The Chevrolet pickup was gone. The gun cabinet that was upstairs in the master bedroom that was never unlocked was found opened. A small safe in the master bathroom also was open. Birth certificates and other papers were scattered about. The beds were unmade. In the kitchen, the coffee pot was still cooking and had nearly boiled dry. Shelley Markley left a pack of Marlboro cigarettes on the kitchen counter. She was a pack-a-day smoker at the time of her disappearance. In the attached garage, the kids noticed that the protective tops covering her dad's prized 1978 Corvette was missing. Johnny Markley never left the car exposed. Johnny Markley's pickup truck was later found locked in the parking lot of a store about 10 miles from the Markley home in the village of Bristolville. No one could recall how long the truck had been there. The doors were locked and the keys were missing. Inside the cab on the console was a couple's cell phone. In the bed of the truck were the two tops that John Markley used to cover his Corvette. On top of the tops was a tire for a semi. Nothing else of use was found in the truck. Johnny Markley was an independent trucker with no criminal record and had no life insurance at the time of his disappearance. Shelley Markley was a stay-at-home mom who was dedicated to her children. They had been married 16 years. The couple left a house that was paid for and a freezer full of food for the winter. The next week, detectives from the sheriff's office examined the couple's checking account. The last transaction was on Friday, December 15, 1995, at 10:36 a.m., 2 hours after Shelley Markley had put her son on the bus. A personal check made out to cash and signed by Shelley Markley was cashed for $1,000. The woman working the drive-through window that morning knew the couple and recalled them pulling up in their pickup. Johnny Markley was driving. Shelley, his wife, signed a check on the dashboard. The teller remembered Shelley was seated between her husband and another man, a stranger whom the teller was unable to describe. A man who had worked with John Markley said he was holding the couple for $10,000 ransom, but investigators have not found anything that would lead them to believe he had any involvement in the Markleys' disappearance. If you have any info concerning this case, please contact the Trumbull County Sheriff's Department, Detective Rick Tackett at 330-675-2508.
Case 11. Welcome to Michigan. The Doe Network has 153 females listed as missing from the state of Michigan. Welcome to Ann Arbor, Michigan. Missing person. On September 18, 1958, 21-year-old Ida Dean Anderson vanished without a trace from Ann Arbor, Michigan. Ida Anderson resided with her family in Florida in the mid-1950s. The 21-year-old Anderson became pregnant in 1955 at the age of 18 and married her baby's father, Kenneth, shortly after. Kenneth was employed part-time as a musician. The couple settled in Detroit, Michigan area and had 2 additional children by 1958. The marriage was troubled, and the 21-year-old Anderson often wrote about financial difficulties in letters to her relatives in Florida. Ida Anderson took her 3 children and left Kenneth in February of 1958. Ida Anderson was hospitalized due to a rheumatic fever and also shortly after she had left her husband. Kenneth placed the children in a boarding home while his wife, Ida, was ill. The state of Michigan took custody of their children as a result of his action, and Ida and Kenneth Anderson spent the next 6 months attempting to regain their parental rights. The 21-year-old Ida Anderson was scheduled to receive custody of her children in mid-September of 1958, but no one is certain if Ida was aware of that fact. Ida Anderson vanished on September 18, 1958, and has never been heard from again. Ida Anderson's children were adopted by other families due to her disappearance. Anderson's oldest son and daughter were adopted by the same family, and their names were changed. Arrangements had been made for Ida Anderson and the children to fly to Jacksonville, Florida after she was awarded custody in 1958. The airplane tickets had been purchased, but they were never used. Ida Anderson's 3 children were reunited in 1995 and began searching for their mother with the assistance of other relatives. The 21-year-old Ida Anderson has not been located as an unidentified deceased victim. A search of hospital records has proven that Ida Anderson was not admitted to any facility in Michigan or the surrounding states after her 1958 disappearance under her name. Anderson's family is concerned that she may have been institutionalized or that she is homeless and doesn't know her true identity. If you have any info concerning this case, please contact the Michigan State Police at 734-994-8881.
Case 12. The Doe Network has 54 males listed as missing from the state of Michigan. Welcome to Grand Rapids, Michigan. Missing person. On May 27, 1991, 28-year-old Gordon Thomas Page Jr. went missing from Grand Rapids, Michigan. In March 1991, Page was placed in the Cascade foster care home on Craft Avenue and 60th Street in Grand Rapids, Michigan. The 28-year-old Page Jr. had been diagnosed with autism, and the home was an established treatment center. Page's family resided in Florida and waited 2 months before visiting Page in Michigan. Gordon Thomas Page Jr.'s father left Grand Rapids after seeing Page on May 21, 1991. Page's father stated that his son seemed anxious and was wanting to go back with him to Florida. Gordon Thomas Page Jr. even attempted to enter his father's van as his father was leaving. 28-year-old Page vanished from the home on May 27, 1991, 6 days after his father had left. Witnesses reported seeing a man resembling Page hitchhiking along Interstate 96 in Grand Rapids, Michigan, shortly after he disappeared from his residence. Part of a baseball card collection was discovered under an overpass on Interstate 96 about 6 weeks later. Cards were located near ramps leading to Detroit, Michigan, and Chicago, Illinois. 3 of the cards had been separated from the rest of the collection. Cards were those of Page's favorite players like Robin Yount, Paul Molitor, and Eddie Murray. It is very possible that the collection of baseball cards belonged to the 28-year-old Page. There have been other reported sightings of Page throughout the United States and Canada since 1991. Page's hobbies include collecting sports cards, shopping at sports memorabilia, music, and antique card stores. The 28-year-old Gordon Thomas Page Jr. enjoyed playing baseball, basketball, and swimming. Page may collect empty bottles of cans along roadsides for cash. Gordon Thomas Page Jr. may be working with migrant workers or employed as a farmhand. Page may linger around automobile dealerships or tent and campsites. He generally keeps to himself or stays on the fringe of crowds. It is possible that Page may have been admitted to a hospital as an unidentified patient due to his medical conditions. If you have any info concerning this case, please contact the Kent County Sheriff's Office at 616-632-6100.
Okay, Olivia, is there anything you would like to add to any of these cases?
They're just, they're very interesting. They're different. Of course, Vermont, I didn't know this was going on in the 30s.
Oh, yeah.
Disappearing in these murders, It's kind of bothersome because I did frequent the area.
Yeah, you had a 1923 case, and then the 1935 case. Like I say, it's been going on for years.
The one in Massachusetts, guy that disappeared, was that Bolger?
Was that what?
Was he involved in that? Bolger, was he involved in that?
No.
But, it's just New England with the disappearances, and even these other states, I mean, Baltimore, Maryland, those areas. It's just very
like
interesting
Michigan.
cases, though. I'm sorry?
Yeah, just like Michigan, they have 153 females listed as missing.
And it's a populated area, isn't it? Yeah. Michigan, I've never been to Michigan. I know you have the Upper Peninsula. That's kind of desolate up there.
Yeah, they have rural areas, but that's kind of high for Michigan when there's only like 50-some males missing from there. So it's very high for the females.
Yeah. So I don't know. I sometimes I wonder if truckers take these girls if they're hitchhiking or something. Is that a possibility?
Oh, in some cases,
take 80 right across the country, right, coast to coast.
Yeah, 80, 90 takes you. Yeah, 80, 90 takes you clear across the country.
Yeah, but very interesting cases. Hopefully someday some of these will all be solved, right?
Well, you know what they say, if you can find any type of evidence, DNA is, getting more and more advanced, but you have to find some evidence with the DNA on it. So.
Yeah, well, they're getting closer. We were talking last time we spoke about these 4 in Idaho. They're getting closer, I think, to something. They have a lot of DNA, and they're looking for somebody in a car or something. So hopefully that'll be solved too. But that's another case that's questionable because you don't know, is there a serial killer out there too?
Yeah.
Or is it somebody that was associated with them? But just crazy all around this country,
Okay, I would like to thank Olivia for being on the show tonight. A special thanks to our viewers and listeners for tuning in, for you all have been so kind. I have a quote for you all. Never deprive someone of hope. It may be all they have. Author unknown. Always remember, folks, that if you ever get bored with nothing to do, well, take a walk deep into the woods. You might be surprised at what you might find. That's the end of our Mja podcast. This has been the series, Cases from the Deep Freezer, Episode 8, Part 9, 12 Unsolved Cold Cases. We say to all of you, good night from Hudson, Florida.